Hey up, everybody. It is another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. That was really northern how I introduced that, weren't it? Hey up. It's great to be back again. We've got another brilliant guest who we're laughing as we're coming on because he's dancing in the background. Nobody else can see it, but we might play it again so he can dance again at the end there. So let's do that. Steve, how are you, mate?
Good, really good. You know what? Feel really buoyant and energetic today. It's been a long day, been a long couple of weeks, but yeah, I did a running wise quickly. I did a 10-miler in Vale of York on Sunday. Horrible weather, but PB. First time I've done a 10-mile, but almost in a 10-mile run, beat my 10k PB and got well below 50 minutes. So I was I was storming it. But today I don't want to give too much when we're recording it, but been on a panel and doing some discussions around AI, the impact it will have on learning. But also my bit was, it's absolutely fantastic. That's great. But let's really think about what we need to change for AI to play a part. You know, the last thing we'd want is AI that students have created an assessment and it's been marked by teachers and nobody's involved because you've not really focused on actually what we need to change. So I really took the Edufuturists to that panel today, even though I was representing Sea Learning as well. And I felt like I was championing all the Edufuturists out there in regards to let's really think about a change beyond it. But how about you, Ben?
Things are good, mate. Like I've been working on a few different projects at the moment, all sorts of different stuff, working in different colleges. But my favourite piece of news this week that we are announcing, and by the time this goes out, it'll be well in the mix, is that we have announced uprising.edufuturists.com, Uprising 2024, our live event on the 4th of July in Leeds at the Old Red Bus Station. So get your tickets for that if you haven't done so already. Go on uprising.edufuturists.com. And ultimately, those of you who have been with us before, you know, we have a laugh. It's about the Wolfpack community coming together and celebrating those people with our awards around those celebrating the future education. So yes, it's been a great week. Probably more so because we've actually decided we are going to do it. Uprising.edufuturists.com, and we can get that stuff on. So yeah, it's been good. It's been really good.
Yeah, the venue is, I would say, very edgy.
Yeah,
I think last year, but 10 times more student-y. Love some people walk. Some of it's been held up. The roof's been held up by scaffolding poles. So it's that kind of place. Hopefully, it doesn't come down by the raucous energy.
Or we'll take the roof off.
Yeah, but I'm excited. I'm so excited to bring it back. At Leeds, obviously my hometown. But I'll meet some people today, Ben, and people going, "We're excited to see your event." I was like, "Well, buy a ticket then. Come on." I know, don't say it. Do it. Come on. Do it, and we'll challenge our guest to make sure he's got one as well. But yeah, let's
bring our guest in then.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So we are super pleased to bring a guest in that has had a bit of an impact on us right from the start in November when I first met him. We've read a book by him and looking forward to discussing this. So we are pleased to, on the Edufuturists podcast, to be joined by Neil Mullarkey. How are you, Neil? He's dancing. That's his music dancing from earlier.
Yeah, I love your theme tune.
Yeah, thank you.
Who wrote that?
AI.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, I certainly read the other day that AI is going to take over the music world. I'm very good, thank you. I was just looking at my calendar. July the 4th, I'm being paid a lot of money to be somewhere else. Otherwise, I'd be in Leeds at the old bus station.
Yeah, well, that's no worries. Like that, we understand. Like it's all about the green, right? It's all about the green. Everything's about the green. No, thank you for joining us. We're very pleased to have you on. We've been trying to make this happen for a little while. As soon as we spoke to you, Neil, for those people who don't know who you are, could you just give us a brief insight into you?
I am from the world of comedy. I do improv comedy, a bit like Whose Line Is It Anyway? But some people may never have heard of that. But the Comedy Store Players, of which I'm part, we do improv on a Sunday night at the Comedy Store in London and elsewhere. It's not stand-up comedy. It's where the audience gives suggestions and the actors act it out. So you might have seen this kind of thing on YouTube, on TikTok, but it really is, we ask the audience and we make it up as we go along. I've been doing that. It'll be our 39th anniversary in October 2024. We started in 85 before anybody watching this was born. But I was taught by Mike Myers, and who's Shrek and Austin Powers and all the other things. He is Wayne of Wayne's World. But 25 years ago, I decided to teach those skills of improv to people in the real world, in business, in organizations, in education, civil service, ad agencies, management consultants, because actually improv is all about working together, being creative, being collaborative. Is that enough of an intro? If you want a little tiny insight, I am in Austin Powers 1 and 3. If you've ever seen it, which is because Austin Powers 1 is sort of 24 years old now, but you might have remembered the Swedish maid enlarger scene. I'm the man who gives Austin Powers that back, and he denies any knowledge of it.
I do remember that scene. I was a massive Austin Powers. In fact, sometimes I don't say sometimes, on a semi-regular basis, I introduce myself by going, "Yeah, baby, yeah," and also just say, "Yeah, give it to me." And when I'm taking photographs of, and the children are like, "Why, Dad, are you being such a weirdo?"
I don't think I've ever told this story. I definitely haven't ever told this, but I don't tell this. I don't really speak.
Don't tell anybody else about it. Is that what you're going to say? You're doing it live.
Yeah, I never speak these words ever because it's a long time ago. But my first ever Hotmail account, when I was just leaving school and applying for university and everything else, was Stephen Danger Hope, and that obviously was driven by my middle name was Danger.
There you go.
It's probably still going somewhere. It's probably one of the 400 million Outlook accounts that I never touched. One of those.
Well, there you go. That's the scene I'm in Austin Powers 1. It's a Danger Powers. No, Danger's my middle name. He says to Liz Hurley. And then I produced the Swedish maid enlarger. He said, no, this sort of thing ain't my bag, baby. And then I produced a book called This Sort of Thing Is My Bag, Baby. I'm not saying the word, but you know what I'm saying probably. Yeah. But yeah, Austin Danger Powers. My middle name is Dangerous. That was International Man of Mystery, which is based on, there was a bloke who used to advertise in the back of the stage. The stage, don't know if you know, this is the newspaper for people, actors and performers. And it used to be a real newspaper. And at the back of it was, you'd have people, suddenly available, unexpectedly available for the summer season, all these acts. And there was one guy, I can't remember the name of him, but his subtitle was International Man of Mystery. Such a good thing. And so that's Austin Powers came from that. Austin Powers, subtitled International Man of Mystery. And so that's what I should have said, really, when you said who I am, an international man of mystery. And that's why I met Ben, I think. I was being international. Well, international for me, at the Google Champions Symposium. I was teaching you some of the skills of improv. How does this stuff that works on the stage work in real life? And the joy of it was that all of this started in the education world. It was a social worker in the 1920s helping children. Inner city Chicago, deprived children, maybe they were not native speakers. She created exercises to give them confidence to speak up. And it was her son who said, oh, these could work as a form of theatre. And he created Second City Theatre, which I had heard of when I met Mike. He was selling tickets for a show I was in London. Second City gave rise to a lot of people who went to Saturday Night Live, particularly for me, the Blues Brothers. So I loved that movie. I looked into John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd. They come from Saturday Night Live in America. And they, like others, had come from Second City. So I met Mike selling tickets for a show. He'd come from Second City, Canada. And we started doing a double act.
What a backstory. From that to Google Champions Symposium to now on the Edufuturists.
The only way he's up is what you're saying there.
I think in the boxes. Google occupiers, friends with Mike Myers, going up and up and up, doing the Comedy Store, and my seat, and the hydraulics on my seat keep going down. So if anybody sees me through, I'm not going down in a lift. I'm not doing improv. My hydraulics in my seat is broken today. I've just all found out. But oh wow, so I love the fact that it's born and elevated out of education. Do you know what a fascinating thing? And I didn't know that. So for those people, just going back to improv, and I know you've talked about it in terms of what it means for the last 39 years. I was born in 1983. I was 40 last year. Ben's 40 very, very soon. So we don't remember it well. We don't remember that starting bit. But walk us through it. Walk us through what that does. And obviously it started in terms of that confidence and everything else. But how can we... It was born in education, and now how we think we can reply it back and bring it back to education and the context of that, I guess.
So the basic thesis is you listen to what the other person's saying. And how applicable is that in educational establishments? Listen to the student, start where they are. You're working with different departments. You're working with your boss. You're trying to create something new in the organization. Work with different stakeholders. Try and understand their point of view. That's the basic thing. It's very simple, actually, because a lot of people think that it's a bit like stand-up comedy, but it's not. It's really, it's an ensemble. We're working together. I don't know what they're going to say. They don't know what I'm going to say. And I might say, good morning, doctor. That's the offer. And then they say, oh, I'm a doctor. Okay, good morning, nurse. How are you? And so we always try and work with what the other person gives us. And so I came up with a 5-letter acronym. So you listen to what the other person's saying and you accept what they're saying. You may disagree, but you start with what they've said to you. And isn't that amazing? Where if you could think about where is the student now? What's their point of view? Can we work with what they have? And I see this in many organizations now. Even yesterday, a private bank in Liechtenstein was saying, can you come and work with us? Because it used to be, we tell everyone what to do and they do it. Now we want people to co-create the culture and to come up with their own ideas and innovate. And later on, I might tell you a bit more about, there are times when you want to drive the scene a bit more, and there are times when you want to just step back. But basically, our ethos is yes and. Yes, I hear what you say and I build on that. And that on the stage works because I don't have a script in mind. I work with what she gives me and she's giving me the same, my compadre. And that is our ethos. Follow the follower. Follow the follower. Now, of course, there are times when people say, well, you can't just have nothing in mind. No, we do have a structure. We start at 7:30, we finish at 9:30. We know who's going to play. We don't know what the audience is going to give us, but we know the games we will play. We sometimes know what we might ask them for the suggestion. Should we ask for a location? Should we ask for a film style? The comedy store is organized: lighting, insurance, drinks, security, food. So there's kind of enough structure there. And this is what people misunderstand. Improv, I use the word improv. It's like a martial art. I've spent years learning how to do this. And people say, what have you got prepared for this Sunday show? How long has it taken you? What are you prepared? No, I haven't prepared anything other than I prepared myself. I've prepared 38 years, 39 years getting on for how to do this like a martial art. We always remember our first teacher. We always remember our first role model. And how many times have I heard somebody say, it was that teacher, it was that coach, that's why I chose to go that way. Or because of that teacher, I hate maths. And it breaks my heart. I have a maths A level. I'm married to a maths graduate. My mum was a primary school maths teacher. Maths to me is a human right. If you don't understand interest rates, you could get yourself in real trouble. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying these skills that I thought could be applied in organizations when I started 25 years ago. Little did I know that there's so many applications. People were talking about leadership as something that adapts and changes. It's not command and control. Leadership as a sense of being okay with not knowing, dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity. And of course, in education, you've got to know the curriculum, but how much more exciting is it to get the children, the students interested in things that matter to them rather than imposing a script on them. And of course, we have to pass our GCSE. We have to know the mark scheme and stuff. But if we could combine a bit of structure and a bit of student-led environments, then I think we'd be in a better place.
For absolute sure. I think I look at how the formality and it's not, I know you're not saying structure is a bad thing. We're actually saying structure is a really good thing as long as it's got wiggle room and it's got margin, it's got space, and that's the one, right? We were talking about we talk a lot on this podcast about Montessori approaches and about play, and I know that that's something that will probably resonate really well with what you talk about. And it's super planned. It's not like It's not like, oh, the kids can go and just play out what they do. It's a planned environment. So it's structured, it's play, but it's planned and it's intentional. So I love that it's not about throwing out the rule book. It's not about saying we don't care about anything, but finding the things that really matter. A few weeks ago, we had Will Goldsmith from Bedale School on the podcast, and they are making changes around slimming down their GCSE offer. And the reason why they've done that is because they believe that they want to do different accreditation stuff. They don't have uniforms. They call their teachers by their first name. They do different things. And I'm not saying any of those things are structures that we need to get rid of. But what we're saying is that they're having flexibility and adaptability, right?
Yeah. So just to add into that as well, I think it really resonated with two things. One from a business point of view, but one from an education point of view. And it all links into, because we're preparing people ultimately for the workforce and next steps and everything else. But we have created compliance in education, compliance in regards to our teaching staff. And the reason that a lot of our teachers are leaving in droves and we're struggling to recruit is because we tell them exactly what to do after they've spent an awful amount of time learning to be the best that they can. But we've got compliance in children. We're creating such a rigid structure of you do a lesson plan and you have to stick to this. So that ultimately, the fear is then a young person putting their hands up or asking a question that is beyond that and just asking for, based on this, could you just explore this? Can we go down this rabbit hole a little bit? Like we do on the podcast. It's not so rigid that we can't delve into something else for the fear of somebody coming into a lesson or not being able to get through a set amount of content over 34 weeks. What? Wow, Joe, that is not what learning is about and education is about. And we have created that systemically. And I think that's a real challenge. But also that improv, that bit. My first experience of that, and I think it will be common knowledge, is I went through the interview experience at Google. I was in education. I'd only been interviewed in education. And during COVID, I went for a role at Google. Wasn't successful, and the person they chose was the right person. And I still work with Google on a regular basis. But they put me through the real, I would say, improv opportunity, where they didn't ask me questions based on experience previously and say, based on this, you tell me how you've done this before. They put me in to situations where they said, this is what we want to ask you. Based on this, what do you think and how can we move forward in this? And what would you do? And what would you do this? And based on some of those bits, and then it'd stem into something else. Not to the improv bit, but I'm like, and now I'm interviewing people based on that methodology. People really, the young people are really struggling with it because they're going, can't you just ask me questions based on my experience and what GCSEs I've got? And I'm like, no, because you're going to be put into situations where you've got to bounce off each other, collaborate and use some improv. Like, where's your curiosity? Where's your impatience? Where's your ability to think on your feet? And it's because we've created compliance in our young people and in education that they've been told, don't ask questions, don't be curious. Curious that it killed the cat, remember? Sit there and be told what to do. I've talked a lot, but that really resonated when you were just talking about that. I just think, yeah, getting it wrong.
Well, the thing is, there is this dynamic: structure, preparation, assessments. How do we assess young people? How do we assess students? And then the real world, which doesn't follow those rules. As I say, I'm a maths evangelist. We should learn our times tables. We should. Then we can speak the language of maths. I think it's good when we learn languages to understand the past tense, the future tense, and learn some vocab. But the real joy comes when we start creating and understanding and sharing. And so there is a continual dynamic. So what I liked really, Ben, was when you said intentional. Because what I talk about my world is intentive listening. It's really listening. I'm on stage. I'm with somebody. We don't have a script. They say something. I treat it as an offer. I'm intentionally going to use something she said. She's doing the same for me. Now, that could be wonderful with a student. And the fact is, though, we are assessed as individuals in some sort of exam or similar situation. And then the real world comes and we have to get on with others. We have to work with people who don't understand us or may have more experience or less experience. We have somebody with a different agenda. There isn't a single situation in life, actually, where at some point you don't have to collaborate. And even if you're making cabinets, you've got to sell it to somebody or take the order or understand what the person who wants it really wants. Generally, life is uncertain. You never quite finish. It's always a bit messy. And for me, that's exciting. We land on stage with no script. We say to the audience, we have no script. We're going to create something for you tonight. And for a lot of people, just like you, Steve, it's kind of scary. You could get it wrong. And I'm thinking, well, actually, no, nothing I say is wrong unless it's really offensive. And you don't do that because your head just tells you not to do it. But generally, you can say anything. I can be a chicken. I can be a cheese. I can make you an elephant. I can make you a ghost. And that playfulness, as you say, curiosity. And a lot of people refer to Ken Robinson and his TED Talk about education. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have structure. As I say, I point out to people, we don't just turn up any time of the day, whoever's on, just do it, whatever. There's sufficient structure. And the world of assessment is going to be reassessed, I think. How do we assess people? How do we assess students? How do we give them a chance in the real world where they suddenly are given a project or they don't know how to do a thing or they've got to go to a meeting and speak up and they've got to go and persuade somebody or they've got to have some thoughts on something where maybe they haven't done the required reading. Or actually what I find so much is people underestimate their abilities. So I just did a LinkedIn newsletter. I've just started doing LinkedIn newsletter. And based on some work I'd just done with an advertising agency, these are clever people who've been in job 3 to 6 years and they understand analytics and data, which I can't. And I said to them, is anyone an expert here? No. It was no. And it was continually, I get a lot of organizations saying to me, we want to hear from those people who are 20, 30, not so experienced, because their ideas are interesting and new. We know we're going to be in trouble if we don't innovate. And even though they don't know the answer that's been used in the past, that's not what we want, actually, because things are changing continually. I know the answer about how to find logarithms in a logbook. Did you go with a log table book into an exam? None of you know. Why the hell did I do that when I can take a calculator, when I can talk to my phone and it'll tell me some multiplications? But during the pandemic, people were shown a logarithmic graph and the curve, because it's logarithmic, wasn't how it is in real life. So just things like that is how much we understanding and how much are we being tested on things that ultimately may not be practical and of use to us in the future.
I think, and this is this for those people who are listening to this, they'll know that we are smiling our heads off because this is the kind of conversation we feel like we've been having and wanting to have on a consistent basis, because we know, and it's usually me that bangs on about this, that high stakes exams as the only measure of a student's learning and understanding are not effective as the only measure. They just aren't, because when will they ever sit in real life for 2 hours on their own with a pen and a piece of paper, not being able to speak to anybody else and not allowed to ask for any help without any technology? It's just that world was a world. It isn't a world now. So I agree. And actually that level of pivoting and that ability to be willing to say, we've done it this far and it's lasted this long and that's been okay, but will it serve us for where we're going? That is a challenge, and it's about a confidence thing, I think, as much as anything else. And I think a lot of people in the education sector have been used to doing this for as long as they have, and then it doesn't always land because people are like, I don't want to change this, because I heard somebody say the other day, everybody wants change, but nobody wants to change. So it's the truth. They don't want to change. People don't really they want change to happen, but do we really need to do something about that change? I know that the conversations around this improv is and how it applies beyond just comedy. It applies in it's everything in life, right? He's kind of surmised in your book, which is behind you. I know, it's a nice little product placement, and it's also here. Look, Steve, where's yours?
I don't have one.
You can get a 20% off voucher if you subscribe to the
Where
newsletter.
though? How would I even do that? What link is it? Should we put it in the show notes?
We'll put it in the show notes to get a copy of it. And I keep getting annoyed by me because I feel like all I talk about is the things that I've been talking about serendip. I've been talking about storytelling, and it really resonated with me. One of the things that really landed for me was when you talked about collaboration. And like almost people, like as one of the 4 C's in the future of education is about collaboration is king. And it's this idea that we should work together. But actually you question that narrative about when it's right to collaborate and when it's. So I wonder if we could hit into that bit from an improv perspective, because collaboration might not be the panacea that some people think it is, right?
Yeah, well, 2 things. I'm on stage. I'm always with somebody else. Sometimes there's 3 of us. Harder to do more than 2, because who do you listen to? Who's got the focus? So on the stage, you can have 6 people, you can have more, but 2 is easier. But it's wonderful when you can give and take. And one of the exercises that Mike Myers used to teach us was very simple. We just stand on stage, silent, and only one person could move at a time. But that person kept changing. Sometimes you might go up to and present it to somebody, then somebody would take it from you. And this game was called Focus. It was very clear who's running with the ball, who's got it. And so collaboration, as you say, is not a panacea. So I'm often brought in to help us collaborate. Sales need to talk to marketing. This department needs to talk to that. IT needs to talk to finance, whatever. And because that's my shtick, I felt I should check into that. And of course, there's lots of research that collaboration isn't always the best idea. And I found that, for example, there's some research that says they looked at a group that's collaborating all the time. There's a group that never collaborates, just does it individually. And there's a group that comes and does a bit on their own, comes and chats, then goes away. And of course, that middle group tends to be powerful. And also there's lots of people, and I'm one of them. I can't do meetings all the time. I need to go away and write it up myself. And so there's just a bundle of things going on here. My editor as well said, you've written a chapter on collaboration, but how do you teach people to collaborate, to foster collaboration? And I thought, oh, that's a bit tricky. And so I did some research and found what are the sort of phantoms? You know, what's the dark side of collaboration? Professor of psychology from London Business School said to me, the kind of shadow is collaboration means I do all the work, you get all the praise. Collaboration means I get dumped. And as the parent of children, I know what happens when teachers say, do it as a group. So what happens? One of the mums does it, or one of the children gets lumbered with it, or they all have a meeting and say, yeah, let's do cheese. No, let's do a thing about space. And then nothing gets done. So people have to be taught to collaborate. It's all very well saying, just go away and do it. And it's interesting because one of the dads at my school he said, I used to have to he did business studies A-levels. I hated it because I had to collaborate with people I'd never choose to collaborate with in real life. But sometimes we do have to collaborate with people in real life. And so we have to accept difference. We have to accept diversity. And we also have to look carefully. And one of the things in my chapter on collaboration is really look carefully as a leader or somebody who reflects on these things is this topic, is this subject one worthy of collaboration, or is it one better done as individuals? Is it one requiring a bit of the mix? Because as soon as I leave the improv stage, I've got an agenda. I'm on the improv stage. I don't mind being a chicken. The audience is laughing. And by the way, improv techniques will bring laughter and fun to the student environment, the classroom, which can never be underestimated. It will always help people engage. But off the stage, I get frustrated with the Comedy Store players who don't answer my emails and they don't want to do the same thing as I do. And I have to learn that compromises there, actually sometimes consensus, don't go for it straight away, maybe just see what happens, what emerges. So I understand that most people have to collaborate sometime in life. And maybe that's what the education system should be teaching us. How you teach that, again, is open to question. You can't just say, do some group work. You've got a week to do this. You need to guide us. And so many schools and places of academic tuition fail to collaborate. That's what I often have to. I do a lot of work with people in education. And of course, they're having to deal with different stakeholders. As soon as you become in management, your deputy head pastoral, deputy head this or that, whatever, your head of department, you've got to compromise with other people. You've got to work with them. Even stuff like, can my child have a morning off to go play football? No. Can my child have the afternoon off from sport to go and do a thing that helps with music? So there's things like that where people have to kind of listen. And that's what listening to me, intentional listening with intent, is understanding they've got an agenda, respecting their point of view. So my acronym is to listen and to accept what somebody said. And of course, one of the things I also deal with in the book is sometimes a problem just doesn't have a solution. Where human beings are involved, we just got to go have a little go. And these are called wicked problems. Wicked problems. There's no solution. If you go, well, do that, that'll sort it out. But of course, it'll make it worse for that lot, even while they're happy. So partial clumsy solutions. Improv, which is try it out, have a go, prototype, check in what's happening, rather than what we really kind of think we want, which is here's the answer. Now just go and do it. And it's a straight line to the end of the problem. So collaboration is a double-edged sword.
For sure. And I've just finished Adam Grant's new book, Hidden Potential, and he talks about the same thing in collaboration. He says, actually, in a lot of spaces, the power dynamics really make whether collaboration works or not. So he talks about this idea of, like, if you've got a powerful person in the room, everybody just defers to that. And then there's the groupthink stuff that comes in there. And the fact that once somebody shared an idea, it's very, very difficult then to ideate in a different or innovate in a different way because you're dominated by that thought that's there. So he actually suggests this process of perhaps people doing the individual work first, then bringing it into that collaborative space. And I know that reciprocates what you're talking about as well in the book. So I think that's really powerful, because yes, we need to allow for collaboration in school, and we've talked about this idea that we do need to work together because we're not going to sit in an exam hall generally on our own. However, we like he said, we've probably got to do something in between, teaching people how to collaborate and when the right time to collaborate is. So yeah,
just to say the how is interesting because brainstorming often doesn't work because the loud voice gets heard and everyone's got their own different story. Whereas improv, we have one story. We listen, follow the follower. That's quite a profound ethos. Listen, accept, pick up their idea. And you may have heard me mention yes and. That's our ethos. Yes, I hear what you say, and I try and build on that. And of course, sometimes you might yes and by saying I don't agree. However, you've paid homage to you paid attention to what they're saying. You don't just negate it. So you listen, my acronym, listen, accept, and send an offer back, even if it's kind of saying why you disagree or taking it in a direction. And this is something that Pixar use, Pixar Pictures. Yes, and they call plussing. You can't critique an idea without having a constructive way of moving things forward, because it's very easy for us to say, no, that doesn't work, Steve. Ben, I can't see how we'd afford that. And that may be true, but right now that doesn't move things forward. So there are lots of improv-based games. Yes, and is one. Another, that's good because sort of trying to find a possibility within even what may feel like a negative moment. Oh, hello. What happened to Ben?
The wrong button. I went to go mute and I removed Ben. My finger.
Well, I think
what happened. I improved. I was like, do we want Ben in this
understand.
one? Do we need to collaborate with Ben on this one? Do we need him in, or should we go
No,
free?
I think the gods of StreamYard were telling you something. That Ben's maybe had his moment.
But I'm living in the moment. I'm in the moment.
Just listening to some of the things that you were talking about, the yes and the ability to listen and adapt on what something else is saying, but also that bit of radical candor. I think it linked to that, and apologies if I'm, but that whole thing of, I think people fear, and I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. People see conflict because of the negative connotations and the use of the word often in the media and everything else. That I see conflict in terms of sometimes positive. Let's not think about the stuff that's happening on the news and the thing that we see in terms of the war conflicts. Think about things where, if radical candor is not about criticizing and breaking somebody down personally, it's about being honest, being open, but also then saying, I disagree, but let's think about this is the reason why, and this is how it would take it forward. Think about that all of that conversation, I think, and being honest of why that positive conflict has to take place, and being open about it is a real step forward. And I think education has a real problem with radical candor and being honest and open with each other, because they see it as Brené Brown, and I definitely talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Brené Brown, clear is kind. That whole thing of that clarity sometimes is fearful, because education leaders haven't often had training on radical candor and adapting and giving people feedback and responding to things and saying, appreciate that, but I'm going to go with this one because I think it's the best way forward and moving it forward. I loved what you said about collaboration. Depending on which bits of the team that you're working with, is also that bit of, is it ready for a design sprint where you ultimately going to hone down as an individual on one thing? You're going to do it on your own, and you might just ask somebody's opinion, or are you going to completely collaborate on something because ultimately you want a large number of voices? Some of the challenges that we have is people think collaboration always has to happen because everybody's voice has to be heard and everybody's opinion has to be sought for every decision that's made. And I was like, absolutely fantastic. That's great. But it's not always the best thing, because ultimately, how do you ever move things forward if you've always got 8 opinions and you never decide? You can't really make a decision on which one you pick and make your own decision. I think it's about seeking advice, listening to it, collaborating at times, but also sometimes you just have to make your own decision and move things forward.
Well, I would say, again, I looked at research, people do this in organizations, and collaboration's probably useful when you need to hear different voices and a wide variety of people have to buy in and then put into operation whatever the decision was. It may well be that it doesn't need everyone's buy-in. It's going to be put into practice. And it may well be you say, well, we'll see how it goes. It's interesting as well, because we've mentioned Google. I've done some work with Google, a very senior leadership team, and I was talking about the idea of servant leader and listening and stuff. And then I said, sometimes actually, even an improv game, somebody needs to take the lead a bit. Okay, this is why we're here. This is what we're doing. Let's make it clear, because improv scenes can be a bit rubbish. Hello, what are you doing? Oh, I don't know. There's a thing. Like, good. Oh, yes, down there. There's nothing. We always try and work out who, what, and where. Be specific, be specific, be specific. And sometimes you've got to just say, with this Google guy, he said, yeah, I'm trying to be a servant leader. And sometimes my team say to me, just tell us what to do. And so that's the dynamic of leadership, is when do I tell us what to do? And in education, the students need to know the facts, their times tables, whatever. And sometimes you need to encourage them by bringing in participation. And almost that's the dynamic and the ebb and flow of any lesson plan, I hope, and indeed any organization. And the other thing, just to amuse you, is I went to the wedding of 2 improvisers, Pete, who do improv on the stage. And I sat next to a guy who's an IT, but he's married to somebody like me. She's an improv person. And I said, what's it like living with somebody like me who's kind of banging on about yes and listening? And he said, when we have an argument, she says, I need a strong, clear offer. What he meant by that was she's kind of saying, what do we argue about here? What is it that's actually the thing, the meat? And we all know that meetings start, we're talking about this, and then we move on to that, and nothing gets resolved. And we end up with 3 people getting cheesed off because what they wanted to be discussed hasn't been. 3 people cheesed off because they've been lumbered with some multiple action that doesn't really appeal to them. 3 other people cheesed off because the meeting just said again what they were going to do and nothing's going to happen because it was discussed last time. But also in relationships, strong, clear offer. I knew what he meant because it starts an argument with your partner. I don't like the way you stack the dishwasher. And it ends up with, I hate your mother. And so what is the thing we're trying to solve? And sometimes we may have no solution. Can we live with not solution? Can we live with a temporary solution? Have we all had chance to have our voice or not? And very often, I think leaders have to say, this is the moment I'm just going to step in and say, this is the way things are. And I think, I don't know where I found it. There was a thing saying leaders' role is to make decisions, even if they're wrong, make a decision, and then we can move on. But I don't envy anybody who's trying to get buy-in, but also thinking we need to move forward. So that's the dynamic, I would say, with improv. We do have multiple voices, but we notice a 2-hand is easier to corral than multiple people. So I always say to people, for example, before a meeting, have an agenda, send it round to people, maybe ring somebody up, have a chat, bump into them. What do you think of that? Could we, what do you think if, so just a side meeting, what might happen, get some buy-in. It takes time, I know, but sometimes meetings are just there for everyone to posture. Nothing gets done, nothing gets agreed. The debate gets stifled. As you say, a lot of what I'm asked to do is we're just too polite. And the radical candor, that idea, we're so scared of being obnoxious and destructive when we could just be creative by helping somebody with feedback that is supportive, but is challenging.
Yeah, and it's about kindness, that right as well, because that the real kindness is telling the truth, but you can do it in a way that is kind and well,
I would just say, my truth is your insult. You know what I mean? I'm just being honest. You are a complete idiot. We have to be careful with our language. Is this an offer, or is this just being rude? Because we do know on that quadrant, we know what obnoxious is. And the number of times I did a session once on feedback, you can imagine, this is a bit daunting for me. This was with an engineering organization. It was all men of a certain age. It was about feedback. And they came in and just stared at me. And they thought, well, I thought this was feedback we're going to give to our bosses. I said, no, your juniors, your direct reports need feedback. Well, in our day, it was get on with it. We'll tell you when you're wrong. Now they kind of want to know. And I went to each of them and said, I bet there was some feedback in your life that helped you. And somebody said, this tough guy, that I wouldn't have thought would be as honest and reflective as he said, yeah, that's right. I was a good sports player. And somebody said when I was 16, you could be good, or you could just carry on like you are and not give a damn. And that was great feedback, because if you look at it, there was an offer of you could go somewhere with this. Not if you carry on that way. Rather than just saying you are rubbish, it had an upside to it. And of course, it spurred him on to keep his head down, actually, and go to the practice, get there in time, etc.
Yeah, there is definitely something there in terms of our response as humans to not being offended. Like I remember somebody once saying, you can't give offense, you can only take offense. Now, I'm not entirely sure that's true. You can be offensive and give offense. It's not about taking. To be fair as well, sometimes we need to grow thick skin, don't we? And we have become a little bit less tough. I won't use the phrase of them things that fall from the sky in the winter, but sometimes people say that's where we are. I'm really interested. I want to make sure that we get to this. I'm really interested in us talking about serendipity. It's a wonderful word in and of itself, but some people think that it's life is about luck and about just landing. You're just lucky where you were, and you happen to be at the right place at the right time. And you really do talk about that from an improv perspective. And I think there's loads to make relevant into what we do as educators. So what does that look like? What do you mean by serendipity?
Well, it's a good word, isn't it? And if you don't know it, look it up. I kind of give my own definition, which is it's pay attention, spot an opportunity. And it isn't just luck. It isn't que sera, or whatever will be luck, as you say. And we are on stage all the time looking for serendipity. We don't know how the scene's going to go. We try and establish who, what, and where. We try and give focus. The scene starts this way. It's about two people in a doctor's surgery. Turns out, actually, it's about two people heading to be in love. And it's allowing the ideas to flourish, but with attention. And interestingly, this was first sort of raised in the business context by the boss of a big management consultancy who do a lot of technical stuff, and he said serendipity it's undervalued in business. In the arts, we have it all the time. Our whole show is, oh, what happened there? Oh, that could be good. That could be the whole reason why the scene is today. Why now? And Mike Myers used to say, you have to work out why the gods of improv have chosen this scene. That's why a bad scene is, hello, what's going on? I don't know. There's a thing there. Establish who, what, and where. But serendipity is the repaying of attentive mind. It's not just luck. It's spotting there's a possibility there. Of course, in art and theatre, it happens all the time. Oh, right. It's ended up there. And in theatre, just to give you this idea, we talk about putting something on its feet. Before you're ready, you say, let's just stand up, move about, see what happens. And that seems to work if you turn around at that point. And I found a clever way of saying this, because a lot of what we think is being right is about deductive reasoning. This was abductive, which was it seems to work. We don't know why, but let's go with it. And I would say that in an education environment, that lesson plan is a great start. But then when that student mentions something that happened in their lives or they're interested in, build on that. Something happened in current affairs. Something happened when they were in the shop. Something happened in their family. Yeah, that's right. And you know how like maths that is, English, geography, history, physics, philosophy, TPR. There's something that's bringing it home to you based on what you gave me. And that to me is serendipity. So serendipity isn't just let's bumble along, let's pay attention. And I'm going to say the educated mind, the trained mind in improv, we know, oh, that's great. That's a possibility. That's going to lead us to an interesting story. Oh, wow. I don't know where that came from, but I'm going to say it again. Oh, I don't know why she said that, but that could be the spine of our whole story. And this openness to the possibility that your plan wasn't as good as the thing that emerged. But it didn't mean you had no plan. But it means paying attention to the periphery. It means being humble that your script, if you like, could be loosened or jettisoned in that moment because it helps that person. We know about it in the arts all the time. Things happen, especially in movies. There's a take, somebody turns left, and then in the edit they said that was the one when they got the wrong word, but something about it told us the truth. So we don't have the luxury of an edit suite in life or perhaps in the classroom, but could we be open to that? And that, I suppose, is where the joy of having structure but being open to possibility, that dynamic, the confidence, the curiosity to play with that dynamic will bear fruit. But of course, it's not everyone's natural game.
No, and the freedom. I think it's going to take a change in the freedom given to often educators, because they're so shackled by that thing at the end that they have to put that knowledge in because they feel that it might be on the test, and that's what's driving them through they're so fearful that if I don't get through in the next 60 minutes all of this content, and when I teach them next, I've got to get through all of this, and then I've got to get through this, and I've got to get through this, because the freedom's not there for them. in defense of teachers. It's and ultimately we've trained them to do that now. When I was first went into education, and through my experiences, those kind of things would happen naturally. And whether you were trained to do or not, you could embrace them a little bit more and at least have the opportunity. And that's my real concern here, that we've created this thing where they don't have that freedom to, even if they wanted to move forward with that. Like I am now a CEO of an edtech company. And I said this today, and somebody said, and I said, I have more confidence in my ability to be an outstanding CEO and leader than I do an outstanding teacher, based on the parameters placed in education and the pressure placed on teachers now, because it's so rigid that actually what makes, like you said quite a while ago during the conversation, we don't remember. I remember when somebody taught that specific subject or content. That's not why we remember the best teachers and educators and coaches. It was that moment where they saw something in us that they allowed us to ask the question and move from it. And they brought something to life for us, and they shared our passion and moved us forward. And is that a challenge to try and bring what we've just talked about, that serendipity, that improv, back into education and allow it to happen with structure and content, but also that ability of sometimes it's just going to go where we take it, and let's see where a young person's mind might just let us wonder through curiosity. Oh, won't that be a wonderful thing?
Well, I'm going to say it's all very well us poncing about here on a podcast. What are we going to do to change it? Because as a parent, I want my children to get the best GCSEs and A-levels. I know employers will look at, or get an algorithm to look at, the stuff we're talking about here, the measurables. I know, on the other hand, there are all sorts of people doing wonderful things who have or haven't got the most degrees and A-levels. How do we bring out the best in each child, each adult? That's the question. And we happily sit here and let it happen. And you can't blame politicians, because how can they judge whether education is working other than by some tangible output, which looks like exams? And also, just to mix it in here, how do we level the playing field if it's not going to be a written assessment, when some children have access to an iPad, tablets, computers, continuous assessment? Somebody else can write it for them. Their parents can take them on holiday to Egypt. And the less privileged children, the only chance they got is that 2-hour exam. So I don't know how we do this. I'm an optimist. I'm a yes and person. I'm just wondering whether generative AI will help us. Because how do we make a teacher's life really valuable? I read that teachers are leaving because conditions are tough. As you say, it's fairly straitjacketed. I didn't know about mark schemes when I was doing my O-levels, which was before GCSE and A-levels. I just knew my teacher taught me, and I did well. But now everyone's got this data. So how do we keep it a level playing field whilst encouraging the curiosity of everyone? Because they need to come out of education with something tangible. And of course, many employers will say they've got the degree and the A-levels, whatever, but they're just not very good at collaborating. They're not good at talking. They're not good at interview. They're not good at explaining their ideas in a forum, even around a table. So how do we help the young people to come out with the skills and the abilities and the confidence? I don't know, frankly, because all we have now, the assessments, and I've done a workshop actually with Cambridge Assessment, who do the exams, and they also now, it's the same organization as Cambridge Publishing. So they make the books, and they're doing exams, but they're also teaching English to people across the world, which is wonderful. How do we embrace digital possibilities? How do we give every child a chance? How do we look at the way to bring out the best whilst also keeping, should we say, excellence? Because actually, it's really great to get 100%, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And some children will get 100%, whether it's maths or poetry or drama or music. How do we have that whilst also acknowledging that not every form we have of assessment works for every child?
So for my 2 pence in that space, not necessarily as an answer, because I don't think there is. This is one of those wicked problems, right? So somebody said to me today, in fact, I was interviewed on another podcast earlier today, and the conversation, they said, if you were president or prime minister or somebody really powerful in the world, what would be the one thing you do? And like, obviously that obvious question. And I'm like, you can't ask me one thing. And they're like, we're asking you one thing. What would you do? I said, well, I would make the primary budget line on the country that I was in charge of education. And they like looked at me. I said, because if you teach people about healthy eating, you're gonna make some decisions about the NHS. If you teach people about how to get on with each other, then you might not have to spend as much money on defence. If you teach that the conversation. So my argument in that sense is that the investment in education, which has dwindled significantly over, and it's not just about this government, it's about lots of governments in the short term. In fact, probably even long. People haven't seen the value of that. So for me, there is that element, but that's systemic. Like, we're always banging on about the system and about the awarding bodies and the government that don't give us the right money, and the education secretary who's got an idea that it's about banning phones. That's the most important thing, which it may well be. My thought process is like, what does a teacher do on the ground tomorrow to help create that space? And I wonder whether that serendipity bit is the crux in that mix. You like, we have a curriculum that staff have got to get through to get people to pass an exam, but it's that opportunity to go, there is a learning moment here. When my first ever observation as a teacher in 2004, way back in 2004, when you were just a glint in somebody's eye, 2004, my first observation with the guy who became my head teacher was very, very influential in my life, but he was actually the deputy head at the time. And he observed my lesson and he went, that was almost outstanding. I was absolutely gutted. And he went, the reason why, he said, there was a moment in that lesson where one of the students asked you, it was a lesson about Aristotle, and we were doing philosophy there, and he asked me a question about how the idea about reason, like, and about whether we should make decisions based on reason and empiricism, and like that conversation around what about if people's rationale or the ability to reason is different? Like, some people have got are educated, some people aren't, some people are experienced, some people aren't, some people can think through possibilities and play chess and think about the moves down the line, and some people just think right now. And he asked me that, literally his question was, what happens if people have got different reason and ability to reason? And I was like, I didn't quite say it like this, but my mind was, that's not what the lesson plan says. And I'm being observed by the deputy head in my first ever observation. And he said to me, you missed a golden moment for learning there. And I was like, yeah, but I tried to argue, yeah, but there's stuff I needed to do. And he went, that would have been way more important right then, not just for that learner, but for the rest of the learners in that class, because you'd have jumped in. And I wonder whether the actual next step, the first concrete step in this change formula, probably is that creating more space for serendipity. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And of course, if I was Prime Minister, I would give teachers a huge pay rise, so that in many cultures, the teacher is a revered character. We look up to her, we look up to him, and like the doctor and the lawyer. And unfortunately, our discourse is not positive to teachers. And it hasn't been for a while. My father would have been a brilliant teacher, and then somebody said, oh, you won't earn enough money. And that was in, the middle of the last century. And he said, I wish I had. So I would say to bright graduates, go and teach. Now, you may not teach forever, or you may go and do something and then teach, but just, could we get people motivated and excited, because you know how brilliant it can be to be a teacher. That moment, and you've probably had moments since then where you did go off script. You did hear that child say, "What about this?" You say,
every lesson after that.
well, exactly. So that deputy gave you the best offer ever, which is, it's okay, the lesson plan, you can get back to it next week or whatever, but you could have made such a moment there, and then he gave you permission thereafter. So could we make people go into teaching, make it fun, exciting, and I don't know how that works, where you get the money from. There are many things that perhaps the government could be doing less of. The trouble is, with our society now, we have to think about lots of people with demands on the public purse. But could we make schools teaching, as you say, because they are the driver of our society, economic, yes, but also social, so that children come out, and there are so many good schools, there are so many good teachers, but could we make them as good as the best? And that requires investment of energy, time, and focus. And I think there is, I can see, the Bedales thing is one thing, is there is a radical insight now saying, are we producing the right sort of environment? And another thing about universities, Tony Blair said 50% children go to universities. And I don't think that's been thought through enough. What are they going to do in tertiary education? Do they have to leave home? Do they have to do 3 years? Could they do something else? What is being given? Because we know that productivity in our country is not kept up with the rest of the world. And yet that was the whole thing about 50% going to university. So anyway, those are my thoughts as a complete idiot who remembers my mum in the primary school. And there was a boy, she said he was a bit, I could see he was bright, but he was struggling with his maths. And then years later, he said this to me, actually. He came to the Comedy Store. He's a tech entrepreneur now. Your mum spotted it, and she had the time to take me aside and work on the maths. Now, I don't know that teachers have the time now. They probably make time. They probably find time in their lunch and outside that. But not every teacher has that capacity or the energy, or they may have been ground down, as you say, by the whole process. Just to go back to my world, the improv thing is, you gave me a perfect example there, Ben, of you accepted the offer. Well, thereafter, you accepted the offer. That was an offer from a child. You didn't script it, but the offer, you could have said yes and there sounds like you did that thereafter. That's the improv thing. Just yes and treat everything as an offer. In fact, there's a book called Everything is an Offer. Sometimes you might say yes, but we can't do that now. You could have said, we'll do that next week or something. Yes, but there's another thing here we need to do. Do you see what I mean? It's trying not to negate the other person's offer. That's the improv thing, and it's been enormous fun for me.
Absolutely. I'm removing my need and want to come in and with my thoughts on how we change education. I'm not going to do it because it's going to take too long. I waffle. But no, I absolutely love it. It will. I just say take the gloves off and create freedom for everybody. Take grades out of every context of education now. Just take it out. Take it from judgments on schools.
You weren't doing it.
I'm doing it quick. Take judgments out from league tables out.
I have to say, how will the rest of society know that the right thing's being done? That's the thing.
What is the right thing, though?
Well, we don't know, and I think that's the question.
We have to find out what the why of education is and the why of learning is. And I think I think so many different. I think this is very British, and this is what I heard of. I said I wasn't going to do this. This is why I didn't speak. I knew we were going to go back into a rabbit hole, and we'll keep you for far too long. But ultimately, how we judge how good our education system is based on league tables, points, scores, grades, everything else. You remove that, like other nations do, and see where it gets to. Let's think about what our why of education and learning is. Removing league tables, grades, and everything else. Let's start there. And like Ben, the only challenge I'd have for that leader is, why even say the word "you almost outstanding"? Even better if. Absolutely brilliant, but even better if. Is because that's a grading, and Ben's probably sitting there. I've seen Ben teach, she's never outstanding, but you know, obviously, but like that's the thing. But anyway, I'm going to go back to my old statement I used to make for the Edufuturists all the time. If we could talk all night. We have now a quickfire series. We never share this with the guests, but if you've listened before, you probably know it's coming. And I'm going to kick off. There's 3 questions, and it is quickfire. Quick.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Future of exams, online, traditional, scrapped.
Traditional.
Key skill for students in 2040.
Creativity.
Education in 50 years. What is your vision?
Personalized learning. Every single child, every single student has their own journey. It'll be digital, of course, but there'll be some other way of assessing, despite my first answer.
Love it. Love it. Well, that is the quickest fire we've had since we started Quickfire. So love that. And you'll be glad to know that the chapter in the book where he's talking about storytelling, our good friend John Neal said that he believes that the key skill for students in 2040 is storytelling. So love it. I absolutely love it. So
can I change my answer then? Because I continually am helping people to tell stories, and story is where somebody has agency, they have values, they have a mission, and tell stories like we used to before we had PowerPoint and spreadsheet. Before we could even write, we had stories that told us this is what we aspire to do. This is a story of avoid those places because there's dangerous saber-toothed tigers. This is a story of how we are as a culture, this tribe. So stories, storytelling. Yeah, damn that. Wish I'd said that.
Creativity is good. Creativity is good.
Well, yes, it was a tough one. I was trying to be short, but there's a whole chapter on storytelling, and in a way, I do actually get down to ultimately as a leader, and dare I say, probably as a teacher, storytelling is your main thing, and that means bringing emotion and logic in, and bringing us to want to know how it turned out.
For sure. And so we're going to put the link to that book in the show notes, and you find out all the stuff that Neil's into in the show
notes. Have you got the 20% discount?
I know where it is. I've got it. Yeah, I've got the.
Don't tell Steve.
All right. Make it full price.
He's a CEO of some massive conglomerate. He clearly can afford.
No, I'm the tightest Yorkshireman ever. So unless I get 80%, I'm struggling. I drink out of dirty puddles, and so do my children, because tap water's too expensive now, Neil. So
no, absolutely love it. And don't forget, if you are still listening and you haven't heard this from the beginning bit, uprising.edufuturists.com for our event in Leeds on July the 4th. Neil, it has been an absolute pleasure. Look, there it is. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And here we go. We won't get to see people doing it, but me and Steve will for our outro. Thanks, everybody.